that to begin with. So here I am with Steve and Nick, and we're talking about 9mm, an energy drink, and how to roll it out, really basically not just nationwide, but worldwide, which is a challenge and an opportunity. And so we're talking about what the next few months might look like, and Nick asked me that question. I'm going to answer it. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'll draft up an agreement for your review and my review, which will have in it not only what I'm going to do, but also the homework that you guys have to do. And I think one of the crucial things for you is to make up a list of strategic partners. Do you remember we talked about that last time?
Yep.
And the strategic partners are, there's an infinite number of them. And what I would do is I would simply look at what Red Bull does. Look at the people who co-brand with Red Bull, and those are potential strategic investors and partners for you guys. And as I said last time we talked, strategic investors are much, much easier to deal with and much less demanding than a typical investor. A typical investor, Nick, you know, you've done it before, maybe Steve, you have too. A typical investor just wants a return on investment. He or she, they just want to know, how much money am I going to make? That's the only question really that they'll ask you, other than, oh, how cool your brand is. But a strategic partner is completely different. So like the typical strategic partners would be people like, you know, snack foods. Be people like you're already talking to at 7-Eleven, distributors of the product. Sports teams. Last time I think we talked about esports. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Which is a hugely growing, you know, field. And one of my clients based in BC, who runs HUD Studios, has a new esport, which is e-games and e-gaming, but combined with physical fitness, which, Nick, you don't know anything about. Show everybody your muscle there, brother. Come on, do one for us. There you go. Oh, no, Steve, you and I, not so much. That was awesome. That was awesome, Nick, really. So I think and esports now is a university level course. So universities, colleges, engineering departments, IT departments, you know, the list of people who are strategically interested in energy drinks is really endless. And so, you know, the people that work with you, and I've said this many times, and Nick, you've heard me say it before, the people you pay should also pay you. So if 7-Eleven is a distributor of 9mm and they're buying, you know, 10 million cases or whatever a year, great. But they could really help you if, let's say, they contract to buy, I don't know, 10 million cases every year. You know, how much is that? If it's, I don't know, if it's a few dollars a case, you know, it's a 20, 30, $40 million order. Often you can ask a strategic partner to make a deposit, non-refundable deposit on that. So if you had a 20 or 30 million US dollar order from somebody like 7-Eleven, they'll often give you, you know, 20% down, for example. And 20% of 30 million, last time I checked, was a check for $6 million. So if we could do some of the fundraising from investors, fine. That's fine, there's no problem. You know, people who have money and like the brand and like you guys, that's great. But if we could also do some work with strategic partners, they ask for much less. And for example, if you got a deposit of 20% on a $30 million order, $6 million bucks, you don't have to give up any equity in your company for that. You guys understand that? And so what I was hoping you'd do is you do a list of suppliers, distributors, clients like 7-Eleven and others. And I think that's a really important part of what we're going to do. And I did ask you by email to give me permission, which I haven't done yet because I didn't hear back from you. Give me permission to introduce you by email to Andrew Maclaren, who is the founder of HUD Studios. And I think I showed you his site last time. I'll just share my screen with you again, just to make sure you recall. So this is HUD Studios website, hudstudios.ca. And, so Andrew makes a game controller. As I told you, Steve, you and I and Nick could play Super Mario, and we'd have, Nick pedaling the bike and you and I playing the game. And the faster Nick, plays, the more power our character has, the more opportunities we have to beat the other teams that we're competing against. It's a whole new way of playing esports, which combines physical fitness with e-gaming. Because, it's very possible to do e-gaming, Nick, and sit in your basement and maybe they smoke a little weed and eat too many chips. And they become quite, even young people are becoming quite, obese. So this is one of the solutions to that issue. But the other thing I would do, Steve, is that even though we would want Nick pedaling the bike rather than you or me, I think in a competition, we might be able to get Nick to do it 50%, but you and I would be required to do it at least for some of the time too. So it would raise the level of fitness of everybody, not just Nick. Mm-hmm. So I think what I'll do is I'll set out, probably be a 2-page agreement. As you remember, it costs $1 million a month for me. Just kidding. It was $1,500 a month plus HST for my work. And on my end, what I was proposing to do is to help you with every aspect of the rollout, if you want that. And so it wasn't just doing business plans, but that would be part of it. And the modern era business plan is actually now more of a slide deck and a voiceover video. Mm-hmm. Steve, you remember that we talked about last time? Yeah, because, really, I have on my computer, I have, 65-page business plans. And other than me, I don't think anybody reads them. Mm-hmm. But if we produce, a 5 or 6 minute voiceover video, which really basically sums up the business plan, I bet you a lot of people will watch that. Mm-hmm. So what we would need is we need a bunch of different slide decks, one for investors, one for bankers and lenders, one for potential clients, people are buying the product from you, one for potential suppliers, one for potential distributors, one for your marketing partners, maybe one for friends and family. I mean, there's a number. You have one basic slide deck, and then you just kind of, once you have the basic slide deck, you can make, 5 or 6 more in a few hours rather than a few days. So it's not too onerous to do that. The other thing that I would work with you guys on is I want to make sure your business model makes sense. And Nick and I have worked, Steve, have worked on business models for a long time. And Nick has gotten very good at that, along with John McMahon and others that I've coached. So we would want to make sure that we have a 1-page business model that really says, here's 9mm in the middle. Here are the clients. Here are the suppliers. Here are the marketing partners. And then we look at another dimension. So we look at who your clients are and who your suppliers are. So we're looking at a supply chain, and we're looking at a sort of a demand chain on the demand side, the customer side. So we're not just worried about 7-Eleven. So let's say 7-Eleven orders 10 million cases, places an order for $30 million. And then the stuff is shipped to 7-Eleven stores across Canada, the United States, and wherever else they are, and they sit on the shelf. That's bad. Bad for 7-Eleven, but terrible for us or for you. So what we want to make sure is that we reach the customer's customer. Steve, do you understand what I'm getting at?
Well, yeah, of course.
So 7-Eleven's customer is typically a young person or an old person, but it's more likely we want to reach the young people. And the way to do that, I think, is through esports. Mm-hmm. If you ask me whether I would rather own a chain of movie theaters or an e-gaming company, there's no question which one it is. Not just because of COVID-19, but even before COVID-19, movie theaters, I think, are really, really in danger of extinction. Whereas e-gaming is exploding. And as I said, at universities and colleges, as well as, people my age are playing these games. And apparently it's very good for your brain, to as you age, to keep it active, right? So they have games for like people who are 85. electronic games. So, but we would really want to reach the young people. And the way to do that, I think, is by having your own events that you could stage virtually today, which would get, I think, millions of views. And so I think that's really important. You know, it's just like Crashed Ice. You remember Crashed Ice? We looked at it last time. It's hilarious. You know, that's a Red Bull property, but you wouldn't want to do Crashed Ice. Number one, it's very expensive to put on. And number two, in COVID-19, you know, I think they did one in Quebec City, right?
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. I mean, it was, you know, it was in the winter, and, you know, Quebec City in the winter is beautiful. You know, they had tens of thousands of people there. It was a huge television spectacle, and it was beautifully done. But that costs, I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars to put on, but it's very expensive. Whereas in e-gaming, you know, worldwide competition, maybe using some of the HUD Studio technology, that you can do, and you can do that whether COVID-19 goes away or not. You could do that for decades, and that could be at least a couple of decades, and we're not really going to look any further than that. So I do think that we need to be thinking about your clients and your clients' clients, and also having an event, and we would want to make that a profit-making event for you guys, because Nick knows that I don't believe in spending money. I believe in making money. And so I love negative cost marketing. It always used to amaze me that I could do, you know, lots of things with the National Hockey League team that I ran at one point, the Ottawa Senators, where people would pay me to market my stuff to them. You know, simple stuff, Steve, where people would drive, you know, 100 kilometers or more to get a free T-shirt. Now the T-shirt, you know, would cost $5. Or the, you know, the little dolls that, what do they call those dolls that shake? I don't remember, but you know what I mean. The little dolls of hockey players, they cost maybe $3 or $4. And then they would spend, you know, $120 or $150 per ticket for a family of 4, and parking, and then hot dogs, and maybe some beer for the adults. You know, they might spend $600 or $1,000 to get a free T-shirt that costs $5. So the cost of marketing was negative, if you sort of follow what I'm saying. And so I think, you know, having proprietary events would be really important to you. The other thing that I think you, Nick, or Steve asked me to do is I would develop a financial model for you. And to do that, I would need some input from you. So in this 2 or 3 page agreement that I would draw up, there would, like I said, it's a cooperative effort. I can't do it on my own. There'd be some stuff for you to do, and there'd be some stuff for me to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Bruce, that you'll give us kind of a blueprint of what the basic deck needs to look like.
Right.
With the kind of almost a kind of the agenda of the deck, and then we will be able to fill in some information and give you back some information on the different topics that we want to cover on the, let's call it the basic, well, not the basic one, but the one that would be kind of the initial deck. And then from the initial deck, we would start separating and maybe adding some different topics, you know, for, like you said, for investors, media, marketing, distributor, manufacturers, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think I mentioned last time, but I'm not sure if I did, but I'll mention it anyway, is, you know, you should be able to pitch anything in basically with 6, to answer these 6 questions. I may have shown you these before. And so I need you guys to really think about this. You know, 9mm, it's for whom? And they want what? It's different because its benefits are, it's unlike the competition because, and its key features are. That's the fundamental thing that we do over and over again. You know, I've lost track now, Nick, of how many people I'm coaching, but it's in the thousands now. And you can pitch anything with these 6 basic points, but that has to come from you. I mean, I will edit it and I will amend it, but you guys know the product better than I do.
Yep. You'll be able to send us that list, Bruce?
Yeah, it'll go.
Awesome.
It'll go in the agreement, and so the agreement really isn't just, hey, pay me $1,500 a month plus HST, I'm good. It sets out the program. The other
Yeah.
thing that I would need to do is, we would need to meet on Zoom like this um, once a month for 2 hours uninterrupted. You guys need to prepare an agenda for that. So Steve, it's your agenda that drives these things, not mine. I add stuff to it, but it's very important because your coach is not your boss. Your coach is not a consultant either. So this is not me doing, running away for 6 months, doing a bunch of slide decks, coming back and say, hey, here we are. That's not going to work. And so we would need to spend 2 hours together on Zoom with an agenda. And part of coaching, Steve, is holding you guys accountable. So you would do, in addition to that, you'd do a mid-month report. So you'd report back to me, here's what we've done, here's what we haven't done, and why. And then in addition to that, Nick, what I would want to do is when you have a key meeting with, say, a buyer at 7-Eleven, or a key meeting with a potential sponsor, or a key meeting with maybe Andrew Maclaren at HUD Studios, or a key meeting with a potential investor, I'd want to drop in again on Zoom and put in my 2 cents. Sometimes it helps to have somebody who's not involved with the company, because I don't own any equity in the company. I don't want to own any equity in the company, but just somebody who's, experienced, which I am, and is a third party. And that can often really help.
Yeah, sure.
But Bruce, you, as much as we have to come in with more of the specific of the agenda, like you shared on our last call, this is kind of a mix between coaching and consulting, right?
It is, yeah.
It is a mix between the two. So you will be able to kind of, I hope, give us kind of a blueprint of how you, with, your experience, see kind of the next 6 months and the touch base that needs to happen for us to be in position,
we need
to present to investors and distributors and so on and so forth.
Right. And for that, Nick, after, one of the first things that the three of us will do, and I'll help you with that, is put in place a critical path.
Okay.
Steve, do you know what a critical path schedule looks like?
No.
So just to give you a little background on it, critical path methodology, CPM, critical path methodology, was put together by some really smart people in the early 1940s, because the Americans, with some help from the Brits and a few Canadians and a few others, were putting together a program called the Manhattan Program to build nuclear weapons. So in World War II, there was a real concern that Germany, maybe Japan, but most likely Germany, would get nuclear weapons first. And if that had happened, I think the war would have maybe ended differently. Some of us would be speaking German today. Mm-hmm. Some of us wouldn't be here. And that would have been a disaster for the planet. So there was a huge program. I don't know how many different companies were involved, but I know there were 300,000 people working on it in probably 1,000 or 2,000 different companies. And they realized, I think in 1941 or 42, they would never complete that program, never. If it was just, people trying to remember, did Steve solve that equation? And did Nick do the refining that he needed to do? Did we have the enrichment going properly? I mean, there were just too many variables and too many people and too many things happening to control. So they didn't know how to do a project on that scale. It had never been attempted before. And so they invented something called critical path methodology. The good news today is we have critical path methodology software that makes it simple. Like you and I, the three of us we will create a schedule, a critical path schedule. So the critical path schedule, what it says is, Steve is doing this, Nick is doing this, Bruce is doing this, and then other people involved are doing this. When are they doing it? Who has to do what first? It's like when you're building a house, you don't put the frame up before you put the footing and foundation in. Mm-hmm. You don't put the roof on the house before you've got the frame. So critical path methodology says who is doing what and when, and who has to complete what before the next step happens, right? So you don't have your roofer show up and the frame isn't done on the house. And by the way, that happens. You know, I have some former students who run a construction business from their by the seat of their pants. Do you know that expression, by the seat of their pants, Steve?
By the what?
By the seat of their pants. It just means they're always guessing.
Okay. Oh.
And they will do stupid things like that. The roofer will be booked in to, you know, put the roof on, and the framing of the house is not done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they lose a lot of money because they're always, you know, doing things 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 times. And I've been telling these young people for a few years now, you need to hire an engineer who runs a critical path scheduling for you. It will save you tens of thousands of dollars on every house you're building. And it will also make sure that you are delivering on time or very close to on time with many fewer deficiencies. So we would need a critical path schedule that maps out what we're going to do over the next 6 months.
Yes.
And you just happen to be speaking to an expert in critical path methodology.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's just for that we're all on the same page. We all understand the different responsibilities, what needs to get done by when, so on and so forth, and making sure that
But the one thing that once we have the critical path schedule, there has to be one of you two guys who is monitoring it. Mm-hmm. Like it won't be me. I just don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it. You know, we have a schedule, we have to stick to it. Otherwise, if you don't stick to the critical path schedule, you know, the rollout will be 6 years from now. That's ridiculous. So you have to have discipline. So either Nick or Steve, one of you, can't be 10 people working as the boss. You know, there has to be one boss who calls up, hey, Bruce, where's the darn slide deck? You know, you promised me. It was supposed to be done yesterday and I don't have it. You know, you call me and kick my ass. But you have to kick everybody else's ass, including your own.
And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I think that probably this is where, that I think that it's also a passion for Richie. Like he loves to, you know, I'm more as a PM kind of project, but he loves to see that everything, the dates, what needs to be done. That's what he's been requesting for, right? Nice. So maybe one thing that Richie could done is just kind of overseeing to make sure we're all in check and we're following the CPM and that everything is getting done. Like I'll do what I need to do, what's part of my responsibility, your responsibility, and Bruce, but maybe he could oversee that just to make sure that everybody's in check. Do you think he would have time to do that?
Yes, maybe we can, I'm going to talk to him and we can put him in the next meeting.
Yep. Awesome.
Because the thing is, I need really to plan because example, next Tuesday, I fly to Reunion Island. It's 8 hours difference.
Yes.
Flight hour. So I will start to move now because the border still start to open. So I need to, it's the big launchment on the island. So, and tomorrow we got a call, me and Nick, we got a call with India, distributors in India.
Yeah.
So, fantastic. Oh, this is so exciting. So I just show you guys, this is a critical path schedule that I did with the Emily Murphy Nonprofit Housing Corporation, all right? So this is a nonprofit housing corporation. They are developing some new structures. And this is not the typical output from a critical path methodology. The reason for I put it on a spreadsheet is that a lot of people don't have critical path methodology software. So if I export it as a .mpp file, which stands for Microsoft Project, people can't read it, right? So I just take the results from the critical path methodology software. I use .mpp, which is Microsoft, but there's lots of others out there. Just put it in a spreadsheet. So it shows, you know, the task number 1 is start, and starting takes 0 days. And then it goes through every detail of what we need to do: hire advisors, select the site, enter into an agreement of purchase and sale to buy that site. We have to do some due diligence on the site before we close on it. We have to get a real estate lawyer involved. We have to do diligence on the legal due diligence. We have to hire a build-to-suit developer, an architect, a general contractor. a project manager. We have to do some financing. We have to develop the functional program. We have to develop the massing and preliminary concept plans. And you can see each of these takes a certain number of days. If you look on this column, you know, this one here, develop the massing and concept plans, is 15 business days. So that's not 15 days, it's 15 business days. So that's like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it shows when it starts, when it finishes, what are the predecessors, I'll explain that in a minute, and who's doing that. This column here says you can't develop your preliminary concept plan without having first done task number 13. So you backtrack to number 13, which is you need to know, sorry, you backtrack to 13, which is here. You need to know what the functional program is before you can develop, you know, a massing plan and a preliminary concept plan. When you look at the predecessors for developing the functional program, we need 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we need to know who our coach is and who our advisors are. We need to have selected a site. We have to have entered into an agreement of purchase and sale. And we will have had to have done some due diligence. So what you get with this is when you come down here is you can see how long it takes. This was 2,500 days, which was almost 7 years. And so without critical path scheduling, boys, it would have taken 2,500 days to do this and almost 7 years. But when you put it into a critical path schedule where some things can be done in parallel, you understand what I'm getting at, Steve?
Yep.
You know, not everything has to do this, right? You can do some things in parallel. You can reduce that 6.84 years to just over 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did with this particular program. So you can see the power of critical path methodology, and it's very simple. I mean, you can just have a spreadsheet, and you can call up somebody. Hey, Nick, you didn't do this, this, and this. You know, get to it.
Yep.
It probably will chop more than half the time off of the rollout.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So you're leaving, Steve, on the 27th. You're leaving next week, right?
28. Yep.
Where are you going, Steve?
Reunion Island.
Oh, yes. Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
So you're coming back the week of the 3rd?
12 August.
12th of August?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably the best thing is for us to kind of have our launch meet. The best thing for you would be to go there, take care of business, do what you got to do. Your 8-hour difference, no matter what. So it would probably for us to kind of have our kind of launch 2 hours with Bruce the following week, like the week of the 17th.
Which?
The week right out, give you a couple days to, you know, get back into the time zone, right? And then we could have our meeting, the 4 of us, also with Richie to kind of finalize the critical plan, the critical path schedule, and kind of have our initial launch meeting, or, you know, coaching / consulting with Bruce. What are your thoughts on that, Bruce?
Yeah, it sounds great to me. Hang on a second. I'm just going to boot up my calendar, and I'm going to look at my calendar. Finally, I'm taking a week off, you know, next in August. It'll be my first week off since Christmas.
Awesome.
So let me just look at my calendar. When are you back, Steve?
The 12th August. I just watched my calendar.
Yeah, the 12th of, 12th of August. Yeah, so that's the week I'm taking off. So could we meet on the 18th of August at 11 a.m.?
18 August, it's at 2. Yeah, it's 1.
Yeah, that works for me. You want to check just with Richie?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be 11 to 1, Bruce?
Yep.
Okay, by that time, you'll send us the contract. We'll finalize that. We'll just sign it. That's going to be done. And then we could have like our launch on the Tuesday, the 18th.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And after this meeting is over, I'll send you guys a Zoom link and password for that. And I'll do the contract over the weekend.
No stress.
Nick. So you and Steve will get it next week, okay?
Okay, perfect.
And it will be it might be a little longer than 2 pages, just simply because this is, as Nick has said, it's some coaching, but it's also some consulting. So it might be another page or two, just to set out a little bit more detail for you guys.
Beautiful.
All right.
Beautiful.
That's
Awesome,
perfect,
Bruce.
because now that's perfect, because now we have some investor, they just wait.
So one of the things, Steve, about the investors is before you accept any investor money, I'd like to know what the structure is.
Yeah.
Like, what are they getting for it? Like, one of the things that I've talked to Nick about in the past is that many investors ask for too much. And, you know, how many 10s are there in 100%? Well, obviously, there are only 10 10s, right? The three of us learned that when we were back in grade 1, that there are 10 10s in 100. And so if you give up 10% to an early investor, and then another 10% to another early investor, and then another 10%, before long, you guys own nothing. And that's very uninspiring. So one of the things that I do, Steve, with investors, let's say somebody was going to invest $250,000 in 9mm, just as an example. And he says, for my $250,000, I want 10% ownership in 9mm. You know, I'm just saying. You know, and then we're going to go out and try and raise 15 million. Well, you set the bar. Well, you know, $2.5 million is 100%, right? At 250,000 for 10%, $2.5 million, you don't own you own nothing of this company. That's a terrible solution. So what I've often done is I say to the investor, so you would like, you know, 10% for 250,000. The investor says yes. Then I would say, well, how about this? We give you 2.5%, but out of your 250,000, only 50,000 of that is equity, and the other 200,000 is debt.
It's what?
Is debt. C'est quoi en français, dette?
Debt.
The debt.
Okay. Okay, I'm good then. So Steve, I want you to really understand this, okay? So now you've got your $250,000, but you know, from the investor's point of view, it actually might be better, because out of his $250,000, $200,000 is eventually going to be repaid to him. So he hasn't got his money in there for the next 10 years. He's got $50,000 of his money in there as equity. And the other $200,000, maybe he's invested that for 3, 4, or 5 years, and maybe he gets a little bit of interest on it, which is fine. And what we tend to do for startups is we capitalize that interest. Do you understand that, Steve?
Yep.
So let's say we said to the investor, look, guys, we're super happy to have your 250,000. 50,000 of it will come in as equity, and we sell that person preferred shares. You know what preferred shares are, right, Steve? Preferred shares.
Qu'est-ce qu'en français?
The preferred shares is meaning that on those shares, Bruce, they have the right of voting and the right of control, and also preferred share. No?
So can I just give me 1 minute to explain it, okay, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, so you guys are going to have Class A common shares.
Okay.
So Steve and Nick and I guess Richie too will have control of the company. Class A common shares have all the votes.
Mm-hmm.
But the investor is going to get a different class of shares. They're called preferred shares. You understand the English term prefer?
Prefer, yeah.
Yeah. So
they are the first one to get paid if there's a transaction, correct? But they have no voting and no controlling rights.
So what that means from an investor point, now let's look at it from the investor's point of view. It's actually better, in my opinion, for the investor to have some of his money in as equity and some as debt. So he gets his money back at some point and only has a little bit of his money still invested in the company. And those preferred shares, as Nick just said, Steve, if there's a wind up for the company or there's a sale, those preferred shares get paid first before you guys.
Mhm.
And preferred shares also come with a dividend protection. So let's say the company's really successful and you declare 5 years from now a $50 million dividend. And let's just assume there's 50 million shares. Some of them are common shares belonging to you, and some of them are preferred shares belonging to investors. I don't know what the proportion is, but whatever it is, doesn't matter. So, so you declare a dividend. You can't just declare a dividend for yourselves and say, to hell with the preferred shares, right? They have to be paid, as Nick said, first. So you can declare a dividend for preferred shares and not for common shares, but not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's to protect the preferred shareholder.
Mhm.
So if I was an investor, it was an investor in this company, I'd rather have some of my money as equity and some as debt, and I'd rather have preferred shares, not common shares. I don't want to run 9mm. What do I know about running 9mm? Nothing. I just like you guys. I like the brand. I want to be part of, maybe I'm good at e-gaming. I want an invitation to your tournaments. So what I'm getting at is that for you guys, it's better because you have control over the company. But for the investor, it's better too. So before you do any transactions with investors, Steve, and Nick too, run them by your coach,
Yep.
me. Because otherwise you will possibly make a mistake.
Well, and I think, Bruce, this is one of the critical aspect of, like you say, putting this plan together, because we will be able to have the conversation on what type of investors we want to bring in and what do we have to offer. And that will be done throughout a conversation that we will have with you. That's going to be part of the model or the business model or the business.
Right, but I know you well enough, Nick, to know that you will be talking to all kinds of people, and probably Steve too, which is fine. You should. Just don't make any promises.
No.
Okay? I mean, there's no point in hiring me as your coach or consultant if you're not going to use me, which is okay. You could go it on your own. But I'm telling you, I'll help you get there much faster. And at the end, you'll control a lot more of this company, which is good for you guys. I've had some people say, oh, I don't need any coaching from you. I know what I'm doing. And they end up with 4% of a company. Mm-hmm. And after, when you own 4% of a company, I can tell you, both of you would lose interest in that company very, very, very quick. Yeah. So the goal would be to end up with control of the company. You know, Mark Zuckerberg has complete control of Facebook. Mm. It's made him, what is he? He's not a trillionaire, but he's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And he, you know, do you know what his business card says, Nick?
I remember you shared that with me.
I did.
No, I don't remember.
His business card is Mark Zuckerberg. I'm CEO, bitch. Okay. So people like Mark Zuckerberg have, he's obviously a very smart person. I'm told he's not a very nice person. I've never met him, but I don't know about that. But I do know that his card says, I'm CEO, bitch. And it's kind of rude, and you guys wouldn't do that. But in essence, the idea is the same. I want you to control this company, and I want you to benefit from it, because you guys you're going to war. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to end up in a battle with Coke and Pepsi and Red Bull, and holy smokes. I mean, it's a war. And so you've got to have control. And at the end of the day, after all the sweat and equity and the effort you're going to put into it, I want to make sure that my clients, you guys, benefit.
Yeah, sure. But I think, Bruce, you're going to need, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to need the complete structure of the company.
Absolutely. I need to know that.
To understand, because it's a little bit complicated.
Knowing Nick, it will be complicated.
I've not been part of that one, Bruce. I've not.
Okay. Been part of that one. All right. You just put Steve in the mirror.
No, it's seriously, when Steve approached me, the structure was kind of already put in place.
But
So,
we might want to look at that, Steve, and maybe simplify it, maybe improve it a little bit. So you will need to send that to me.
But
yeah,
maybe
Bruce, you know the tool Lucid Chart? Have you used that tool before?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so on Lucid Chart, what I'll be is I'll work with Steve while he's in Reunion Island. I'll create a diagram of the company structure, and then I'll invite you to the workspace. So you'll be able to see, because there's a couple of decisions. Because right now, just to give you a quick overview, the mothership is in France.
Yep.
Right? And the mothership owns trademarks, the name, so on and so forth. Correct, Steve? Yes. There is four different shareholders in the corporation in France, and we'll be able to share with you who they are and what's the percentage that they own. But now we want to open a new corporation that's going to be called 9mm Americas. And Americas will be utilized. We'll have all of the rights. We'll have a license, I guess, Steve, of using the trademarks and the protection and the name and so on and so forth.
Americas va avoir des parts dans notre unité internationale.
And yeah, 9mm Americas is going to have ownership in 9mm International in France. Going to have a portion, okay?
And I like the name 9mm Americas. Because Americas implies North America, Central America, and South America.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good name. Steve?
Yeah.
Whereabouts on Reunion are you going?
I go to Saint-Pierre.
Here.
Exactly. So the airport, it's Saint-Denis, up.
Yeah.
Up, it's the other side of the island. So our office, 9mm office, are in the Saint-Pierre.
It's fantastic. Look at the location of it. I am told this is one of the most beautiful parts of the world.
Oh, it's very beautiful. And we're gonna have we're gonna start too in Mauritius, but the thing is that the border is closed until 31 August. But we're ready to start Mauritius too. It's the island just.
So the next trip you take should be in the winter.
The next what?
The next trip to Reunion should be in the winter time.
Yes.
Because their winters are not quite like Ottawa or Montreal.
But it's a winter now in Reunion Island. It's
yeah, I realize that. But what will the temperature be there? It won't be cold.
No, it's 23, 25.
Yeah. Their winters are much nicer. But can you imagine what it's like to go there? Where's the equator? Yeah, there's the equator. So, you're fairly far south of the equator.
Yeah.
I've been to South Africa in the winter, and it can be quite cold.
Yeah.
But this is really fantastic. Oh, my God. The Indian Ocean. If you want to ditch a plane somewhere where you can never find it again, like the Malaysian Airlines, keep your eyes out for the Malaysian airliner.
Oh, yeah.
Steve, you remember that airliner that went weird flight and then they ditched it in the Indian Ocean?
Yeah, it was Mauritius.
I don't know where it was, but they ditched it somewhere. And I mean, it looks like either the pilot or the co-pilot or both of them killed all the passengers and ditched the plane in the Indian Ocean like they were crazy, I think.
Oh yeah.
And they looked for the Malaysian Airlines plane for a couple of years. They couldn't find it. The Indian Ocean is
huge.
Oh yeah. But I passed 1 year in Reunion Island just.
No way.
Yeah, because when we built the files and when I bought the 9mm with my partner, I was preparing all the stuff with the lore, everything in the Reunion Island. So that's why I was 1 year there.
Look at this. Look at this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very near from Mauritius, but it's so different island. It's two completely different island. Yes.
I spent it belongs to France, n'est-ce pas?
Exactly.
Yeah. I spent quite a bit of time in Martinique with my family, and what a great experience. And I sailed from Sydney, Australia. I lived in Sydney for many years. I sailed from Sydney, Australia in a 35-foot boat to Papeete in Tahiti.
Yeah, I went there too.
It was fantastic, and I was a young man then, and I found the girls in Papeete were very nice.
I went 3 times there because I have friends there, so I visit Bora Bora, Moria.
Yeah. Well, by the time I ended up in Martinique, I was married and had 5 kids. But when I was in Papeete, I was just I was 19,
Oh, okay.
and it was a lot of fun. And I was crew. I wasn't the skipper. I was a mate, and so I was a crew.
Okay.
So I was second mate on the boat. I was in charge of the night watch, and we sailed 3.5 weeks from Sydney to Papeete.
Wow.
It was a great experience, and then we stayed there for 3 months. My skipper had some business he wanted to do, and I just basically partied for 3 months. And those are memories you never forget, right?
That's right.
So listen, guys, I really have enjoyed this. It's been fantastic. And I really hope and think and believe that we can do something fantastic. I'll see you soon, okay?
Awesome, Bruce. Thank you.
All the best.
Goodbye.